We welcome you to the 2018-2019 Women's Basketball Division II East Region Podcast right here on D2EastHoops.org alongside the expert of Division II Women's Basketball, Steve Zerdillian. I'm Tim McCaffrey. Let's get into our team-by-team preview, and we start in the Northeast 10 Conference. And we'll begin, Steve, in the Northeast Division of that conference with last year's NCAA East Regional Champion, Stonehill Skyhawks.
Lots of losses for Stonehill, Tim, starting with Northeast 10 Player of the Year, Kelly Martin, a couple of All-Stars in Samantha Hyslip and Courtney Walsh, and Defensive Player of the Year, Elizabeth Grip. 4 of the 5 starters are gone, so that means Trisha Brown has a lot of work to do to get the remaining players that were in the rotation and a new crop of freshmen that are very promising to be part of a team that can have success on the floor. The pieces are definitely there, and I think for Stonehill it's going to take time, but they have the kind of potential that they can be a team that could threaten to win 20 games this year.
A team that threatens to win 20 games seemingly every year, the Bentley Falcons under head coach Barb Stevens, the NE10 champion a year ago, and another NCAA tournament appearance.
If the beat continues for Bentley, that's always the way it is for Barbara Stevens. There's enough returning material here to consider this team among the favorites in the region. Let's start with Victoria Lux up front. Megan Lewis really came on last year after getting over a knee injury the previous season. The keys for Bentley, I think, this year are they need perimeter players. Among their losses, they lost Becca Musgrove, Mackie Smith, and Lauren Green, 3 excellent perimeter players. So look for Maddie Springfield and in particular Amy McConnell to fill some of those gaps. And a couple of newcomers as well, Maine Freshman of the Year, Main Player of the Year as a freshman, Colleen Bouchard, should get a look to play a lot for Bentley. So for Bentley, they need to get supporting players to take up bigger roles than last year. I think the rotation might be shorter, but in the long run, that might help the Falcons.
It's always hard for St. Anselm when you're looking up at Stonehill and Bentley seemingly every year. Is this a season that they can contend for an NCAA tournament berth?
Well, maybe. You sometimes forget that they won 17 games a year ago, had a really good season, and they do return one of the best players in the region, post player Shannon Ryan. The problem for the Hawks is the players around Shannon Ryan. They lose 2 really good role players in Allie Glennon and Clary Putnam, and there was a drop-off after that when you talk about freshman Peyton Steinman, who had a really good season, by the way, and Sarah Messler. The support players really need to improve for St. Anselm to be considered a team that can threaten the top tier in the region. With Ryan, it's possible, and they've got some good freshmen coming in, but it does remain to be seen if the support folks can actually fill those roles.
Another team that was 17-12 last year, the Southern New Hampshire Penmen. This was a team that had some tremendous wins in beating Bentley twice and Southern Connecticut State once. They fell short of an NCAA tournament bid because they had some really rough losses. Southern New Hampshire can't get over the hump and make an NCAA tournament. Do they do that this year?
Well, it's now or never, Tim. They have one of the best players in the region in Kylie Lorenzen. They have experienced players around her and Brianna Kamara, Molly Terry, and the potentially exciting Gianna Russell. They've got some players coming in that could help as well. So they've made incremental growths over the last couple of years. I think they were a little disappointing last year, frankly, to only win 17 games. No excuses this time. Lorenzen is among the best in the region. They've got enough experience. They need to get over the hump this year.
Speaking of teams that are trending upwards, Merrimack 15-12 a year ago, all 5 starters returned for the Warriors.
I really like Merrimack. You mentioned all 5 starters. There's a continuity and a style of play among the Warriors that really makes them different from a lot of other teams. They got a good shooter in Lindsay Werner, a couple of really good freshmen last year, NE10 Rookie of the Year, Alyssa Casey among them, Mason Kimball as well. They have a defensive stopper, Antonia Davis-Stewart. And let's also remember they do have a player in Lexi Martin coming back off an injury, and 2 years ago she was among their best scorers. So I think Monique LeBlanc's team here, people look at them and say, well, they're competitive, they're solid, they won 15 a year ago. This is a team, if you're looking for somebody to take that extra jump, this might be it. It's their last year in Division II, so they need to do it right now.
The Assumption Greyhounds, 10-16 a season ago, but there have been teams in the NE10 that have had seasons like that and then bounce back like take, for example, Stonehill a couple of years ago. Is Assumption that team this upcoming season?
I'm not sure they have the pure talent that Stonehill team had. When you talk about Stonehill, you had Kelly Martin coming back off an injury, and everybody knew that they were going to be good. For Assumption, with all due respect, I'm not sure they have the players at that level. They have a good interior player in Morgan O'Donnell and a really nice point guard in Megan Reen. They have a lot of young players as well. So I don't think they're going to take that big jump. They should win more games than last year if they get some of their bench players to mature a little bit and fill roles. But it is going to be difficult to crack the top 5 in this division. It's that competitive.
So a team that looks to crack the top 5, St. Michael's, the Knights 3-13 after Christmas last season. If that trend continues, they will not be in the NE10 tournament.
The interesting thing for St. Michael's is they always have some good players, and they do again. I like Samantha Delaney, Emily Ferreri, Brianna Purcell. These are good, solid players, but they tend to not have a lot of depth, and they do wear down. So over a 40-minute game, you tend to have some issues where they just fall off at some point, and a close game becomes a 10 or 12-point game, and the day is done. So I think for St. Michael's, if they can somehow develop more quality depth among their top players, they could threaten a playoff spot, but it is a long road to do that.
Franklin Pierce comes into this campaign having lost 19 consecutive games. They'll probably break that early with a non-conference victory in the first few games of the season, but they're holding up the rest of the NE10 Northeast Division.
Yeah, when they hired Jeanette Rito, now Jeanette McKillop, they knew it was a long-term proposition to get back to respectability, and they're taking the proper steps to try to build the foundation. There are some quality players there. I like the way Maya Mosley played last year. Sophia Holmes as well was a good, solid player. They're going to have some new faces coming into the roster this year that will obviously get a chance to play right away. There's no expectation of a playoff spot for the Ravens this season. What they want to do is take another small step forward, and I think they're well positioned to do that. Let's
transition to the NE10 Southwest Division, where Southern Connecticut State earned an at-large to the NCAA tournament last year as an 8 seed and was competitive in the opening round game against the Skyhawks of Stonehill. Kate Lynch's squad has been trending. You talk about a team going in the right direction. 21-10 last year, an NCAA bid. Doesn't get much better than that.
I tip my hat to Kate Lynch. She did a wonderful job last year. Nobody really expected a whole lot from the Owls last season after they lost a huge chunk of their scoring the year before. But she found players, and she put them in a position to succeed. And they lose a couple of them, in particular Abby Hurlbert, who had a terrific senior season. Only 2 of their top 7 are back. But, this is a team that has enough to compete. I'm just not sure that they have quite enough to repeat a 21-win season. But the standard for the Owls now is they're going to compete even if they aren't at the top of the division. So I would expect that to continue.
We should mention we're looking at these teams in the order that they finished last year on the season preview. Gina Castelli's Lemoyne Dolphins squad has, in my opinion, the most dynamic point guard in the region in Michaela Roberts. But they have been a team that has finished 500 in every season but last year in league play. They finally got over the hump and finished 12-8. Can they get over the next hump, which is to make an NCAA tournament bid?
If they're to do that, Tim, they need their front court to be rebuilt. They lost the entire front court last season. They've got a crop of newcomers this year, 4 of whom are 6'2" or taller. So they've got the potential to be a good team. You mentioned Michaela Roberts, who is among the best players in the region, period, whether she's a guard or whatever you want to categorize her as. And that's a good thing to have. Sometimes they rely on her a little bit too much, and I think early they may rely on her a lot to get this team to come together. But if they can find a couple of players among those newcomers who can contribute right away in the front court, this is a team that could, again, duplicate that kind of a season.
Carrie Seymour's pace unit has been stockpiling talent over the last couple of years. A team that kind of been a sleeping giant in the Northeast 10. They've been asleep for the most part. Do they wake up in the 18-19 campaign?
If they get more consistent, they could. They got off to a terrific start last year, starting off winning 8 of their first 9 games, but they cratered after that, went 2-10 and tried to recovered enough to finish with a winning record. But there's talent there. Alexandra Monteleone is one of the more underrated players, I think, in the league. She's a good all-around player. Lauren Shedder had a nice freshman season last year. The problem, though, for Pace is every year there's always the question of can they get enough players coming together. And the one thing that they lack with this group, and I think that they've lacked for a while, is they lack that upper-tier player, such as a Michaela Roberts, that can earn you 3 or 4 more wins. Maybe somebody can develop into that. As on paper right now, they don't have that, and I think that's the only thing holding Pace back from maybe threatening a 20-win season.
A youthful Adelphi Panther squad led by Missy Traversi, 14-16, a little disappointing in my eyes, but being that young, they have most of their roster returning.
They were seriously young last year, and the playing time for those young players that they received last season can only help them going forward. Traversi brought in a couple of Division I transfers this year, a couple of 6-footers. Among their younger players, I really like Katie Murphy and Emily Machilli. Neaja Morgan is back as well. A couple of losses that will hurt Simone Hobdy and Natalie Fakula, but there's a lot of talent on this roster, and Traversi is a good enough coach to get them to work together, and the style that they have is really beneficial to them. I would expect them to be among the better teams in the division.
In the last couple of years, St. Rose has gone from borderline NCAA tournament contender to not making even a run in the NE10 tournament. They've ended 16-17 at 1-8. They ended 15-16 at 0-8. That combined, if you're not a math surgeon, is 1-16. St. Rose has struggled down the stretch, and they have some talent in that program.
Yeah, when you talk about ending seasons, they've ended seasons terribly at 1-8 last year, and that almost blew a playoff spot for them. There is talent there. I'm not sure why it's not coming together. Carissa Birthright, Ashley Vanderwall, Alea Dollard, they have more than enough ability to be a consistent playoff team. There's no reason that the Golden Knights can't be at least a 500 team this year, but somehow they've got to get over that mental block of breaking down in February. If they can do that, yes, they'll be a playoff team, and they could certainly be a team that might host a playoff game. But how do they do that? They haven't shown any way that they can do that the last few years.
New Haven has a new head women's basketball coach, but the top 5 scorers from this program return.
This is an interesting group in New Haven. Debbie Buff takes over for a team that won 12 games a year ago. Alexandria Kerr, among the best scorers in the Northeast 10. A lot of other quality players. I like Brie Pergola's freshman season last year. They made a push for the playoffs last year, but came up a little bit short. If they can get some stability with a new head coach and a new style, this is a team that in a pretty competitive and wide open division could take a step up, at least into a playoff spot.
The team that finished last in this division a season ago has the team with the player I like watching the most in Dana Watts. So what's been wrong with AIC, and can they rise up in this campaign?
Last year was inexplicable last year for AIC. They had injuries. They had chemistry problems. They lost 10 games by 10 points or fewer. Nothing worked last year for AIC, and I think they just want to sweep the decks clean and get back to being who they are. They do have a lot of players back. You've mentioned Dana Watts, who is among the best players, not just in the region, but in the country. Very few losses. They've got a couple of new faces in as well, and Zoe Willis, who's from London, and Sabrina Armstrong from Virginia, along with the returners, Alyssa Guyon, Rashana Siders, Ashana Brown. There's definitely enough here for AIC to not just flip their record around, but win 20-plus games and be the team this year that they thought they were going to be last year.
Well, Steve and I are going to take a sip of water, and when we return, we will talk about the ECC. That's when we come back right here on D2EastHoops.org. We welcome you back to D2EastHoops.org. Tim McCaffrey alongside Steve Zerdellian. Let's get right into the East Coast Conference, where this is an interesting one to start off with as we take these teams in the order that they finished last year. It's LIU Post. On the men's side, a lot of turmoil under that program. You would be able to tell me a little better what's going on with the women's side.
Well, this is one of the better teams in the region, assuming everybody stays there, and there's no indication that anything other than that's going to happen. Now, again, 22 wins a year ago, an NCAA tournament bid. Deidre Moore's an outstanding coach, and it's going to be a shame to see this program disintegrate the way it's going to in the future. But in the here and now, this is a really good team, and this is the ECC favorite. Sasha Patterson and Micaiah Moore, an outstanding duo inside. Shannon Doyle, Taylor Hudson among the players on the perimeter that can get it done. They have that high tempo, forcing the issue style that gives teams a problem. And they should get off to a good start, Tim. 8 of their first 11 games are at home. So a fast start, knowing that this is the end of the road for the program. I think those things can really push LA Post into an outstanding season.
It's fun watching the St. Thomas Aquinas Spartans defend. 27-5 last season, a breakthrough year for Kim Lusk. East Coast Conference champion, NCAA tournament, but this is a team that, through all good things, sometimes must end, and they lost a lot of talent.
In particular, Jenna Erickson, the ECC Player of the Year, who was just brilliant last season at both ends of the floor. Adia Henderson and Alex Bertolino also move on. So, yes, things will change for the Spartans this year. But they do have quality players back, and they showed in the postseason that they can take the jump to being program leaders. Zaria Thomas, Julia Winnick, and Emily Preston in particular were very impressive. Repeating as ECC champions is unlikely. Winning 20 games is unlikely. But St. Thomas Aquinas will not drop off the map. This is a team that has enough to still be a playoff team in the conference.
Roberts Wesleyan, a team that I liked a lot last year, Steve, 20-10 a year ago, on the cusp of making an NCAA tournament. I think they were not seeded in. It was the proper 8 teams that made it. But they have a new head coach, and what's the outlook for them this year?
Right. Kevin Clifford has taken over, recently the head coach at Buffalo State and Mount St. Vincent. He was a player in the Division II level at Sacred Heart University way back when they were a Division II program. Some losses here for the club. Nasita James, Lucy Coveley, and Taya Andrews move on, and they're big losses. But in the core with Emily Miller leading them, I think is good. Maybe they just needed a different voice. Maybe they just need a different perspective. I'm not so sure. They've got some newcomers in that should help bolster the roster. So things can go either way here for Roberts Wesleyan, depending on how they merge together and how the new coaching style takes hold. So we'll see how they're going to be. There's enough material to be a playoff team, but where they're going to go up or down, still we just don't know here at this point.
19-12 a year ago, the New York Institute of Technology has 9 newcomers. Is there a team we know less about that could be as good as NYIT?
Probably not. This is going to be a good team, by the way, and it's rare to say that when a team has lost their top 2 scorers in Maya Hood and Nina Vukasavljevic. But the Bears have a bevy of players coming back that are solid players. Freshmen last year, and Taylor Triptree and Shirley Frierson were very good. They get Meg Nolmeyer back after missing last year with an injury, and she was terrific 2 seasons ago as a freshman. Again, the 9 newcomers, they're going to factor in some way for Kenny Parham's club. He's a good coach, and he's proven to be very adept at taking a large roster with varied talents and bringing them together. If this mix really works together, you're looking at a team that will definitely threaten for the East Coast Conference title and an NCAA bid.
You called Queen's season last season the classic 500 season, basically right where they should be. Which way did they go in the 18-19 season? Up, down, or right in the middle?
I think sideways would probably be a
great
good
movie.
Result. Would be a good result for them. The talent drain has showed the last couple of years. And of the Rollins, they lost the last one in Merrick last season. They do return one of the most dynamic players in the conference in Beth Bonin. Other players who played decent roles are going to have to get better. They're going to have to rebuild their front court as well. And they do have some new faces that head coach Ben Namoski is going to integrate right away. So, I think that they're probably going to be in the same vicinity, around 500, battling for a playoff spot. Namoski's a good coach. She knows what she's doing, and she knows how to recruit players. And now it's a challenge for her. And coaches love challenges, and she's going to be challenged here to get this group together around Bonin and make them a playoff team.
Well, these next 5 teams are all in for a challenge. Damon 12-17. They lost their best player. Can Damon be in the mix for a playoff bid in the ECC come tournament time?
We'll have to see. I mean, it was a struggle to do that. They finally got there last year, but Sarah Saba is now a pro in Luxembourg. She had a fantastic career there. They had some other players who had solid years who were now going to have the offense thrust upon them. Jordan Heinold, Tiara Filbert, and Caroline White in particular. They've got 6 newcomers coming in that head coach Jennifer Banker is going to have to find a way to integrate. It's a team that's going to have to form a new identity, though, Tim. With Saba gone, she was the security blanket, so to speak, and she was the key for that team. Now they're going to have to find a way to do it without her, and that could be a plus in the long run, but I think in the short term, there's going to be some growing pains for the Wildcats.
It seems like every few years we get a new head coach at Bridgeport. 9-19 last season. New head coach, same problems for Bridgeport?
The roster is interesting. They've got 10 players back, but they underachieved last year, winning just 9 games. They were in the playoff mix for a while, up until the last 2 weeks or so, and I'm not sure exactly what it's going to take for to get to the point where they're moving upward on a regular basis. Janie Mitchell takes over. She was an assistant recently at Stony Brook and at Kennesaw State, played her college ball at Georgia Tech. So she's been around the block and knows what it takes to be successful. But this is kind of a mismatched roster that she's going to have to cull together and figure out where they're going to go. As a first head coaching job, it's a challenge. We'll have to see how that develops for Bridgeport.
One of my favorites, Joe Pellicane, still at Malloy, still churning good basketball teams. Always a team you don't want to face late in the year, but 9-19 last season.
Joe Pellicane is always fun to watch coach because he knows exactly what he wants to do and how to do it. And he understood that last year was a season being so young that they were going to have their growing pains. They had a lot of players back, pretty much everybody that mattered. Innocence Grady, Melody Pritchard, Gabriella Asperu, Catherine Gibson, all back. A bunch of newcomers as well, a couple of transfers that have some talent. And Pellicane knows how to bring those elements together. They do need to mature. They lost 8 games by single digits last year, and they need to find a way to score some more. But I think if we're looking at the teams that were sort of in the bottom tier in the ECC that could take the jump to the top tier, maybe I'm saying 3 or 4, Malloy's the one to look out for.
Jim Harder had the Mercy Mavericks at 8-20 last season, but too many stop and starts for this program. Another new head coach.
And it's Scott Lagas' turn to see what he can do with the Mavericks. It's been a long time since they had a non-losing record. It's been 2 decades. They've got some talent there. They return a lot of players. Amber Brown and Cynthia Perez were very good last year, and they're back. Destiny Hall returns after missing last season with an injury. But the gains are going to have to be small for Mercy. It's usually a step forward and 2 steps back. If Lagas can get them to double figures and wins this year, that'll be a huge plus.
UDC rounds us out in the ECC, 4-24 last season, and you would expect them to win more games this year.
Well, you would expect so. They were so young last year, but one of the best freshmen in the region, Deji Quick, has moved on from UDC, so they're going to be new again. They do have 3 transfers from the Division I ranks. A couple of them are big players, 6'3" and 6'4". They do have some younger players who played a lot last year, Mia Alexis Lloyd and Natasha Roy among them. There's a long road back here for the Firebirds. 4 wins a season ago was maybe a little bit of a disappointment, but again, like Malloy, they knew that they were going to have a season where they built and they struggled. That was it. They may have to do a little bit of that again this year. So if they can threaten a playoff spot, that'll probably be a good return for UDC.
Well, Steve and I are going to get a bite to eat, wash it down with a soda or so, and then when we come back, we will have the Central Atlantic Collegiate Conference preview. And that's just in a matter of seconds. You won't even know we're gone. That's when we return on D2 EastHoops.org. Welcome back to D2EastHoops.org. Tim McCaffrey alongside Steve Zerdelian. And Steve, if there's a division that is maybe taking a step back, it's the top of the Central Atlantic Collegiate Conference North. We're taking these teams in the order that they finished last season, but most of these teams have lost. They've lost the store. There's not much returning to a couple of these programs, including Bloomfield.
Well, Bloomfield had a terrible start last year, lost their first 6 games, started 2-8, but once they got into CACC play, things were completely different. They lose a couple of key players. Jeanne Robinson was a great scorer last year. Cam Shabines and East Barnes also have departed. Among the returnees, they do have 2 solid players in Deja McKenzie and Bobby Floyd. They're going to have to rebuild the lineup. Vanessa Watson did a great job last year, winning 16 of 19 conference games, and they ended up as the co-divisional champions along with Caldwell. I think the challenge this year might be a little greater to try and rebuild the roster, but traditionally, Bloomfield is one of the top 2, and there's no evidence that that's going to change.
Tori Northup Jones took over a loaded program, but the gun is empty at this point in time. There aren't a lot of shells in there. They lost their top 4 scorers from last year, a perennial NCAA tournament contender over the last several seasons, and Caldwell looks to be trending in the wrong direction.
Yeah, 124 games a season ago, and Had a very good year, fell short in the NCAAs, but getting there was a big plus for them. But they waved goodbye to Christian Draxler, Sherelle Sanders, Mara Kelty, and Carly O'Driscoll. And that's, as you mentioned, Tim, that's a serious talent loss there. There are some rotation players that are back, Tina LeBron, Andy Lennon, and Kristen Siskimanis. So the cupboard isn't completely empty, but their roles are going to have to change. New players are going to have to emerge. So I would expect a backslide for the Cougars. But again, with this division, a backslide means you just maybe win a couple fewer games, and they still should be among the contenders.
My favorite to win the CACC North, Dominican. Just something about them this year, and watching them last year be competitive against really good teams and having most of their players come back. What say you, Steve Z?
That's an interesting take, Tim. Dominican should close the gap a lot to the top two. They started 0-8 last season. So they were 500 after that, or actually over 500 after that. The only key loss is Rebecca Ribeiro. Other key players are back. Jasmine Gee, Taylor Tomlinson, among them. Bill Diener's done a nice job with this team. They got a lot of players who can score. If they can really defend and rebound as a group, I think they're going to have some more success. They've got a couple of new faces, and Ashley Merritt and Karina Guerra to keep an eye on. So, Dominican, there's a gap in this division. Traditionally, you've got the top two, then you've got the rest. Dominican's been the best of the rest. And frankly, when you take a look at the rest of the teams after the top two, combined, they won 4 non-league games a season ago. That's just not going to do it. Dominican should be better than last year. They should break 500, and they could very well challenge the top two.
Dominican's been in that third place slot so long they've decorated it. Next up, Felician at 10-17 a season ago. Big step forward. Will they be in the mix to win this wide-open CACC North?
Well, I don't know if they're going to win it, but again, this is another team that should be better than last year. Steve Fagan has a lot of key players back. Janelle Gibson, Cameron Stone, Bianca Chambers are among those players. They have to score some more, though. They scored less than 60 points a game last year, so they're going to have to find a way to generate more offense as a group. But with enough players back, with some experience, and with a really good season last year, considering where they came from. I think Felician can be better. Whether that means they finish higher than 4th, I'm not sure. But I think they'll definitely be better than last year.
The team that was the most successful down the stretch of the season to not make a conference tournament, would be the Post Eagles, who were 6-3 in their final 9 late last year. Now, a lot of that was the competition they faced. But John Plefka had the team going in the proper direction. And there's something about John, maybe it's because I umpired him in baseball a long time ago, that I like a lot.
He's also got 8 of his top 9 scorers back. Players like Gabriella Middleton, Tony Darren, Megan Gotham, Lauren Chambers. They've got the experience under Plefka. They did finish strong, which is certainly a big plus when you go into the offseason and get ready to start the new season. If they can start this year better, I think they can be a team that might threaten 500. So we may see an accordion effect in the North Division, where it used to spread out wide. Now it might get a little tighter. And so the gap from top to bottom, or at least 1 through 5, might get a lot tighter. And if Post can get off to a good start and find that rhythm that they had at the end of last season again, then they could be a team that also takes a step up and is better regardless of where they finish.
Concordia, 4-24 last year, Steve.
Tough year, a couple of key losses. Julian Wilkinson had a terrific season last year among them, but they do have a couple of rotation players back in Nicole Nicholson and Amaya Rankins. They've got some newcomers in that will get a chance to play as well, but this is another team that struggled to score, just 54 points per game last year. They shot 32% from the field. That's not going to do it. They're going to have to find a way to be more efficient offensively if they're going to improve. I
love going into the NIAX Gymnasium to watch the games there. It's just a fun place to watch basketball. But the NIAC women's basketball team was 2-26 last year.
Well, that speaks for itself. It was a tough season for the Warriors, and David Julian's going to try to get them to take small steps forward. A couple of players back from last year's group, and Brianna Brown among them. It's difficult for NIAC to really improve a lot this year. If they can improve gradually, that would mean a successful season for them.
Let's transition to the CACC South. Tim McCaffrey along with Steve Z as we take you through the Division II East region school by school. It was the best season at the University of the Sciences, 30-4 in school history. They were the CAC champions. They almost won the region. Other than that, not too much going on. But it could be hard for them to repeat, not in the NCAA tournament, but as the CAC South champions, because this is a loaded division.
It's a very strong division, and it's going to be fun to watch it develop over the course of the season. If you're a basketball purist and you like watching the game the way it should be played, you should love watching Sciences. Jackie Hartzell's team is wonderful at passing, moving, finding open space. They spread the floor well. They made almost 10 threes a game last year, so obviously they can shoot it. Lots of players are back, which is a plus. They obviously know the system. The key losses, Sarah Abenizia, who was just sensational last season, especially in the postseason, she's gone, and so is Laura Trish. But there's more than enough back here for the Devils to be at the top of the tree again in the league. Alex Thomas, Colleen Walsh, Jordan Vitelli, and keep an eye on Arissa Yee to emerge this season. They've also got some new faces coming in, a group of freshmen and a couple of players coming off redshirt seasons should help the depth. And this is a group of players that know how they want to play. They're very intelligent about how they want to play and execute, and they take on the characteristics of their coach like most really good teams do. They don't get too high, they don't get too low. They just keep on doing what they do, and I think they're just going to keep on doing that and have another good season.
So when we say that Sciences is going to make the NCAA tournament, we say, not so fast, my friend. I think that this team, Jefferson, will host the regional. We'll talk about that more in our playoff podcast coming up. But Jefferson, 26-6 last year, another NCAA tournament. Tom Shirley in his 30th year, 1 win shy of 600. Almost got that in the NCAAs last year. Can Jefferson win this side of the CAC?
Sure, absolutely they can. 4 or 5 starters back. They played really well last season. They were targeting this year as opposed to last year as being the year that they would break through, but 26-6 meant they broke through big time. Jessica Kaminsky, Alana Williams, Beverly Coombe, Erin Marr, all back. They've got some fresh faces coming in that should see some time. The only key loss was Rachel Day, and this is a group that did a lot well. They got to the free throw line a lot more than their opponents, +9 in free throw attempts per game. They were +7 on the glass. At all 6 of their losses, Tim, were by 10 points or less. So they accelerated that timetable last year. Now they're going to be the hunted. They can certainly stand up to that scrutiny, even in a tough division. And I think they're a team to really watch.
If you wanted to see classic basketball, fun basketball last season, you needed to take a look. And if they're still online, go take a look at the Chestnut Hill Jefferson women's basketball games last year. Go West, young man. That's what they did at Chestnut Hill when they hired Michael West, 19-10 last year. But I am going to predict that this is the year that they make it to the NCAA tournament, Steve Z.
You're stealing my thunder, Tim. Will you stop it, please? They were terrific last year, and they have almost everybody back. 4 of their top 5 scorers are back. The only one that doesn't return is Vicky Tumaz. Jada Wildgoose, Cassie Siebold, Mary Trocy, Shannon Glenn. That's a really good group. They have some depth as well. This team can score. They beat Sciences twice last year, so you know that they're not afraid of matching up with the other strong teams. They're going to be the 3rd best team at worst in this conference, and they could finish 3rd in this division. When we talk about it being a loaded division, it really is, and I think Chestnut Hill is poised to get over the 20-win mark this year.
So who will finish 4th place in the CAC South? This is a question we've asked for many years about the CAC North, but we've kind of flipped the divisions. Holy Family finished in 4th place last year. Melissa Dunn, 10-18 a season ago. Will they be the team?
I absolutely think they will. They started off really poorly. They lost 11 of their first 12 games, so they turned it around at the end of the season. They finished 9-7. They got themselves into the CACC playoffs, and only 1 key loss in Alexis Hofstadter. There's enough quality back here: Casey Schweitzer, Elizabeth Radley, Katie O'Hare, Casey Thomas, to be a good team. Unfortunately, they're staring up at 3 of certainly the top 10 teams in the region in this division. So their record may not reflect the fact that they are getting better, but I think the Tigers are getting better, and I think that they're going to be one of the better 4th place teams in the country.
Goldie Beacom, 9-19 last year. Their offense has been a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, they scored 56 points a game last year. 10 times they were below 50, and they shot 26% from 3-point range. That's really not going to do it. The good part for Beth Ann Burke's group is they're a little more mature now. They return a lot of players. Their key loss is Brittany Bryson, who scored 14 points a game last season. Alana Speaks, Tanner Turner-Rush, Amanda McGrogan are among the returnees for Goldie Beacom. But they've got to find a way to get consistent. They didn't win back-to-back games at all last year, and they're challenged by a tough division. So they are making gains. Again, a little bit like Holy Family, it may not be necessarily reflected in their record or their standing, but I think that they should be better than last year, just comparatively speaking.
It seems like decades ago, when they were an NAIA program, Georgian Court was a power. These days, they have really struggled, and last year was no exception at 5-21.
Yeah, there was some talent there for the Lions, but they had a lot of areas where they struggled. I mean, teams took 11 more free throws per game than they did, which is an astronomical amount. They turned the ball over 5.5 more times than their opponents. You just can't give away the basketball that way. Couldn't win close games. They were 2-13 in games decided by 10 or fewer. They lost 3 overtime games. So, they're going to have to clean up some of that if they're going to improve a little bit. Jaz Perzek has some players here that are pretty good. Destiny Thompson and Krana Prokic are back, and they'll get Jada Atchison back after basically missing all of last season with an injury. If they can clean up some of those areas that they struggled in last year, they should be better. Whether that means they're going to challenge for a playoff spot or not, I'm not really sure.
If Wilmington can clean up the defensive side and play like they do on the offensive side, they have a chance to get that 4th spot. At 6-22, Rob Miller in his second stint with the Wildcats.
This is a group that can score, and they have enough pop to worry teams at that end of the floor, but they gave up 82 or more points 8 times last year, and they couldn't stop anybody from doing anything at the end of the season. They lost their last 10 games. They did lose a couple of key players in LaShira Williams and Ebony Dixon, although Dixon, they both suffered through injuries last year and didn't play much. There's enough back to be better. Nairi Grant and Emma Matthews and Macy Robinson among the returnees, but unless the defense gets better, it's going to be a tough slog for Wilmington to take a step up.
Well, there you have it. That'll do it for us on the D2EastHoops.org Women's Basketball Season Preview Podcast Edition. Alongside Steve Zerdellian, I'm Tim McCaffrey, and we hope you join us for more podcasts right here on D2EastHoops.org. Stay tuned. Right on this website, you will see our playoff preview edition on D2EastHoops.org. So long, everybody.